The village sat quietly between dry fields and a narrow road that most travelers no longer used. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's routines, where news traveled faster than the wind, and where stories once told never truly disappeared. At the far edge of this village stood a small, broken house that most people pretended not to see. The roof leaned slightly to one side, the paint had long faded, and weeds climbed the walls, as if trying to hide it from the world. This was where the old woman lived. People did not call her by her real name anymore. Many had forgotten it, or claimed they never knew it. Instead, they called her the witch, sometimes in whispers, sometimes openly, especially when they wanted to scare their children into obedience. No one could say exactly when the nickname began. Some said it started when animals got sick years ago. Others blamed her when crops failed, or when strange sounds were heard at night. Over time, the truth no longer mattered. Fear had settled in, and fear has a way of growing roots. Every morning, the villagers followed the same patterns. Men walked toward the fields or small shops. Women gathered water, swept their doorways, and shared quiet talk. Children ran through the dusty paths on their way to school, laughing loudly until they reached the part of the road near the old woman's house. At that point, their laughter always faded. They walked faster, eyes straight ahead, pretending nothing was there. Some held their breath, as if the air itself was dangerous. The old woman noticed all of this. She saw how people crossed the road to avoid passing too close. She heard the sudden silence when children spotted her from a distance. She felt the looks that burned even when no words were spoken, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago that defending herself only made things worse. Silence, at least, allowed her to exist without being chased away. Her days were simple and quiet. She woke early, often before the sun, because sleeping too long made her body ache. She moved slowly, careful with each step, her bones stiff from years of hard work and harder living. She boiled water, ate whatever little food she had, and spent time sitting near the window. From there, she watched the village live without her. People believed she did strange things inside that house. Some said she talked to herself. Others claimed she mixed dark liquids or wrote symbols on paper. The truth was far less dramatic. She talked out loud because silence made her feel invisible. She boiled herbs because medicine was expensive. She wrote letters she never sent to people who no longer remembered her. Years ago, she had tried to greet her neighbors. She had smiled, waved, even offered help. Once, she returned a lost goat to its owner. Another time, she warned a family about a broken fence near their land. But every action was twisted into something suspicious. The goat return became a rumor about curses. The warning turned into blame when the fence fell anyway. Slowly, doors closed. Smiles disappeared. Words stopped coming. Now most villagers claimed she had always been strange. They convinced themselves that avoiding her was the right thing to do. It made them feel safer. It also made them feel united, as if sharing fear gave them a reason to belong together. Among these villagers lived a young girl who did not belong to that comfort. Her life was not easy enough to allow space for fear that came from stories alone. She lived with her mother in a small, worn house not far from the fields. Money was always short. Food was often counted carefully. Each day was about surviving the next. The girl woke up early too, but for different reasons. She helped her mother with chores before school. She fetched water, cleaned the house, and sometimes cooked simple meals. Her clothes were old, but clean. Her shoes had thin soles, and during rainy days, her feet often got wet. Still, she rarely complained. Complaining did not change anything. On her way to school, she passed the same road as everyone else. She knew the stories about the old woman. She had heard them from classmates, from adults, from the air itself. "Stay away," they said. "Don't look at her. Don't answer if she speaks." First, the girl followed those rules. She walked quickly past the house, eyes down, heart beating a little faster. But something always pulled her attention back. Sometimes it was the way the house seemed forgotten, like a shoe left by the road. Sometimes it was the old woman's shape behind the window. Sitting still for hours, the girl began to notice things others ignored. She noticed that the old woman was always alone. She noticed that no one ever visited her. She noticed that when the weather was bad, smoke still rose from the small chimney, meaning the woman was still there, still surviving. One afternoon after school, the girl saw the old woman struggling outside her house. A small basket had fallen over, spilling vegetables onto the ground. The woman bent slowly, clearly in pain, trying to pick them up one by one. People passed by on the road. Some looked. None stopped. The girl slowed her steps. She remembered every warning she had ever heard. Her feet felt heavy, as if the ground itself was pulling her back. She could have walked away like everyone else. No one would blame her. No one would even notice. But she also saw the old woman's hands shaking. She saw the tiredness in her back, bent more by life than by age. And in that moment, fear felt smaller than kindness. The girl stood there, caught between what she had been told and what she felt. Her heart beat loud in her ears. Helping meant being seen. Helping meant risking rumors. Helping meant stepping outside the safety of doing nothing. Across the road, the old woman looked up. Their eyes met briefly. There was no anger there. No darkness. Only surprise and something else the girl could not yet name. The moment stretched. The village seemed to hold its breath, and then, without fully deciding, the girl took a step forward. That single step would quietly change everything. Though neither of them knew it yet. The road remained silent. The house stood the same, but something unseen had shifted. Like the first crack in a wall that had stood too long, the girl moved closer. Her heart still racing, unsure of what would happen next. Behind her, the village continued as usual, unaware that a story long shaped by fear was about to meet something stronger. This was only the beginning. After that rainy afternoon, the girl could not stop thinking about the old woman. For days, she felt a tug in her heart whenever she passed the broken house at the edge of the village. The basket of vegetables kept replaying in her mind. She remembered the slow, careful movements, the quiet patience, and the way the woman looked at her with surprise rather than fear. It felt strange to think of a stranger as kind, especially someone who the whole village believed to be dangerous. Life did not wait for thoughts or feelings. Her mornings still began with helping her mother. Water had to be fetched, the small house cleaned, and sometimes food cooked before school. Her hands were rough from work, and her clothes were patched in several places. Still, she carried herself with a quiet pride. She had learned that even in hardship, small acts mattered. The world might not notice, but she knew it did inside her. At school, children whispered about the old woman whenever the girl walked past. They told exaggerated stories about curses, strange noises, and mysterious lights at night. The girl listened quietly. She had heard these stories all her life, but now they sounded different. They did not scare her the way they used to. They sounded lonely. The girl started to watch the old woman from a distance whenever she had a free moment. She saw her tending to small pots of herbs, carefully watering what little plants she had, and moving slowly but with purpose. There was dignity in her movements, a sense that life had taught her many lessons, even if the world had refused to see them. The girl began to understand that fear often grew from misunderstanding, and sometimes courage meant standing against it. One evening, the girl decided to carry a small basket of bread and fruit to the old woman. It was not much, but it was all she could spare. Her mother had warned her to be careful. "People talk," she said softly. "Be safe." But the girl had already made her choice. The need to do something kind was stronger than the need to follow fear. The path to the house seemed longer that evening. Every step felt heavier, as if she carried not just the basket, but the weight of everyone who had believed the old stories. The sky was a dull gray, clouds low and heavy, threatening rain again. She almost turned back, but she remembered the small, shaking hands picking up fallen vegetables. She remembered the surprise in the old woman's eyes, the small spark that seemed to say, "I am here, but I am alone." When she reached the gate, the old woman was sitting in her usual place, by the broken steps, staring at nothing. She looked smaller than the girl expected, like the years had folded her into herself. The girl hesitated, then placed the basket gently in front of her. The old woman looked up. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Her eyes were sharp, clear, and not at all frightening. She studied the girl with a quiet curiosity, as if she were trying to understand why someone would do something so simple and kind. The girl smiled softly, not wanting to speak too loudly, not wanting to disturb the fragile moment. "Hello," the girl said quietly. The old woman blinked, surprised that someone dared to speak. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she nodded slightly and reached into the basket, lifting a small piece of bread with care. It was almost ceremonial, the way she held it, as if she were afraid it might vanish if treated carelessly. The girl waited, not moving, allowing the silence to stretch comfortably between them. After a moment, the old woman spoke. Her voice was thin, but steady, like the wind rustling through dry leaves. "You brought this for me?" she asked. "Yes," the girl replied. "I thought you might like it." The old woman studied her face, noticing the dirt on her hands, the worn clothes, and the quiet determination in her eyes. "No one comes here," she said softly. "I know," the girl said. Wanted to help. For the first time in many years, the old woman smiled. It was small, almost hesitant, but genuine. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to smile at another human being without suspicion or fear. "Thank you," she whispered. The girl felt a warmth she had not expected. It was different from the warmth of a fire or the sun. It was a quiet, steady feeling that made her heart lighter. She sat down on the step beside the old woman, careful to leave space, but close enough to share the moment. They did not speak much after that. Words seemed unnecessary. The act of being together, even briefly, was enough. Days passed and the girl continued to visit. Sometimes she brought small gifts, bread, fruit, or even a patch of cloth she no longer needed. Other times, she simply sat with the old woman, listening to her stories about long ago, about life before the village had turned its back. The old woman spoke of joys, mistakes, and lessons learned. The girl listened quietly, absorbing every word. Word slowly spread through the village that the girl was spending time with the old woman. Some children whispered in school, some adults frowned, and some elders shook their heads in disapproval. They wondered why she would waste time on someone they all believed to be dangerous. But the girl did not notice. She had discovered something deeper than fear or gossip. She had discovered connection. The old woman, too, began to change. Her shoulders straightened, her steps became less hesitant, and her eyes shone with a faint light that had long been hidden. She started to take better care of herself, encouraged by the girl's presence. Small improvements were made in the house. Weeds pulled from the garden, clothes washed and mended. Life, it seemed, had returned to a place that had been waiting. The bond between them grew silently. The old woman taught the girls small lessons: how to care for herbs, how to notice the subtle signs of weather, and how to move through the world without anger, even when others were unkind. In return, the girl shared her own stories of the village, of school, and of dreams she barely allowed herself to speak aloud. Each learned from the other. Each grew stronger in ways that the other could not have imagined. One afternoon, neighbors spotted the girl leaving the old woman's house. Whispers spread quickly. "Why is she helping the witch?" they asked. "She will bring trouble." Some parents forbade their children from playing near the girl. Some villagers shook their heads and muttered as she passed. But the girl continued her visits unaffected. The world could say what it wanted. Her heart knew the truth. The old woman began to look forward to the girl's visits. It had been a long time since she had looked forward to anything. The days of loneliness were now broken by anticipation. Even the animals seemed to sense the change as small birds occasionally came to perch nearby, watching the quiet friendship grow. Rain fell often, making paths muddy and slippery, but the girl never hesitated. She wrapped herself in old clothes and careful shoes, and she made her way to the house. Each visit was a small act of courage, but also of hope. She was learning that hope could be as powerful as fear if only someone chose to believe it. The old woman, in turn, began to share secrets she had never spoken aloud. Stories of a life once full of laughter, friends, and family. Stories of mistakes and regrets. The girl listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply sitting quietly, letting the words sink in. For the first time in decades, the old woman felt heard and understood. Even the smallest gestures carried weight. A nod, a smile, a gentle pat on the hand all became language enough to communicate trust and appreciation. The girl had opened a door that no one else dared to touch. She had shown that kindness could bridge walls built by fear and suspicion. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the village began to notice the change too. People started to see the old woman differently, even if they did not yet understand why. They could not deny the girl's courage and the quiet joy it brought to someone long ignored. While gossip still lingered, the first seeds of reconsideration had been planted. The girl's visits continued without fail. Each day was a small triumph. Each shared moment strengthened a bond that would soon prove stronger than rumor, stronger than fear. It was in these simple, quiet acts that something remarkable was growing. Something no one in the village could have predicted by spending time with the old woman. The girl was learning that life's value was not measured in wealth or popularity, but in the courage to act with compassion. The old woman, in turn, was learning that even after years of being cast aside, trust and friendship could still find their way into her life. Together, they were creating a world within a world, a space where kindness mattered more than judgment. This was only the beginning of a story that would quietly, but surely, change both their lives and, eventually, the lives of those around them. The bond between the girl and the old woman grew slowly, like a small plant pushing through the soil after a long winter. Each day, the girl came to the edge of the village, carrying little offerings of food, clean water, or sometimes just her quiet presence. The old woman waited patiently, often smiling faintly as she saw the girl approach, her heart lifting in ways she had long forgotten. There was a rhythm to their meetings now, a comfort that both of them felt without needing to say much. Other villagers watched these encounters from a distance. Some whispered, some shook their heads, and some even scowled openly. But the girl continued, walking through mud, rain, and sun, guided by something far stronger than fear. Her courage became quiet but steady, and the old woman noticed every act of devotion. She realized that, after years of isolation, someone truly cared without expecting anything in return. The girl began to learn small, practical things from the old woman: how to tend plants carefully, how to identify simple herbs for teas or remedies, and how to preserve vegetables for a time when money was scarce. The old woman spoke little at first, but as trust grew, she shared more stories of her past, of mistakes she had made, and of people she had once loved. The girl listened attentively, absorbing wisdom that no book could teach. One chilly morning, the girl arrived to find the old woman struggling to light the stove. Smoke filled the small kitchen, and her hands trembled with the effort. Without hesitation, the girl stepped forward, helping her adjust the fire and settle the wood. The old woman watched her, a rare light in her eyes. "You are patient," she said quietly. "Not many would stay and help." "I just want to," the girl replied softly. Their days began to include small routines. They would sit together outside, sorting vegetables or folding clothes, and sometimes simply watching the sky. The girl found herself asking questions about life, love, and mistakes, while the old woman offered gentle guidance, never judgment. Every lesson was wrapped in stories or quiet acts, teaching resilience, patience, and the value of kindness. The girl's mother noticed the change in her child. She saw that the girl walked with more confidence, smiled more often, and carried herself with a new sense of purpose. Though the mother still worried about the village gossip, she also recognized the strength the girl had gained from her quiet friendship. Sometimes she would glance toward the edge of the village, wondering what exactly was happening there, but she did not interfere. The girl had found something important, something worth protecting. The old woman's house, once so lonely and silent, began to feel warmer. The plants grew a little taller, the garden a little greener, and even the small animals that lived nearby seemed less wary. Birds perched on the fence and chirped their songs, as if celebrating the renewed life that friendship had brought. The old woman laughed quietly one afternoon when a curious cat wandered through the garden, and the sound startled the girl with its rarity. It was a small sound, but it carried years of loneliness in its absence. With time, villagers began to notice subtle changes. Some children, curious about the girl's courage, watched from afar. They saw her leave the house with a smile, carrying small gifts for the old woman. Some adults began to whisper, questioning their own assumptions about the woman they had long avoided. Though fear and gossip had deep roots, small cracks were forming. One day, as the girl swept the steps of the old woman's house, she noticed a small box tucked under the bed. It was dusty and old, almost hidden. The old woman caught her eyes and said nothing at first, simply letting the girl examine it. Inside were old photographs, letters, and faded mementos from a life that had been full once, before the village's suspicion had pushed her away. The girl handled the items carefully, sensing the deep emotions they carried. "You see," the old woman said after a long pause, "life is not always kind. People judge, people fear, and sometimes the ones who care least are the ones who speak the loudest. But kindness finds a way." The girl nodded. She had begun to understand what that truly meant. It was not about grand gestures or heroic acts. It was about small, consistent choices. It was about staying when others walked away. It was about seeing humanity where others only saw fear. They spent afternoons talking, sharing stories of hardships and dreams. The girl learned how the old woman had once been a teacher, beloved by her students, admired by the community. A series of misunderstandings and tragedies had led to her isolation. No one had stopped to ask the truth. Instead, whispers had replaced conversation, and fear had replaced understanding. The girl listened with empathy, absorbing the lessons of both sorrow and resilience. In turn, the girl shared her own life. She spoke of her mother, of the struggles to make ends meet, and of small hopes she had never dared voice aloud. The old woman listened, offering advice, encouragement, and sometimes simply silent companionship. In these exchanges, both found a balance neither had expected. The girl gained wisdom beyond her years. The old woman regained a sense of purpose she had thought lost forever. One rainy afternoon, as the two worked together in the garden, a strong wind blew through the village. Branches cracked, leaves scattered, and the small garden seemed threatened. The girl instinctively reached for the old woman, guiding her to a safe spot, and together they secured the fragile plants. That moment solidified something unspoken between them. They were no longer simply companionable strangers. They were a team, a quiet force against the loneliness and fear that had surrounded them. Slowly, the girl noticed how her neighbors' behavior had begun to shift. Some children walked a little closer to the edge of the road when passing the old woman's house, watching with curiosity rather than fear. Some adults hesitated before turning away, wondering if perhaps they had been wrong all these years. The girl did not speak of it, did not boast, but she noticed. She understood that courage sometimes worked quietly, affecting the world without fanfare. The old woman, too, felt the change in subtle ways. Her back no longer ached as much, her hands were steadier, and her heart felt lighter. Life was no longer simply survival, it had become presence, attention, and care. Each day she felt less like a figure of rumor and more like a human being. Deserving of attention and connection, they began to plan small projects together. A corner of the garden was dedicated to vegetables for the girl's mother, while another corner was filled with herbs the old woman had long cultivated. They repaired broken furniture, cleaned the small house thoroughly, and shared laughter over simple mistakes. Each day became a step forward, a quiet affirmation of life reclaimed. Through these routines, the girl's courage became more evident. She faced the whispers of the village without flinching. She walked with a steady pace, carrying herself as someone who had discovered the power of compassion. And the old woman watching her felt hope bloom in ways she had not experienced for decades. She realized that even after being ignored and misunderstood, life could still offer connection, joy, and trust. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, the two sat quietly outside. Watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple, the old woman handed the girl a small bundle of herbs, carefully tied with string. "Keep these," she said softly. They may help you when you need them." The girl took the bundle with reverence. She had come to understand that kindness was not measured by how much one gave, but by the sincerity behind it. The old woman had given her more than herbs, she had given wisdom, trust, and a reminder that even in a world that often turned away, one person's kindness could matter. And so their days continued, each moment building on the last. The girl learned patience, resilience, and the value of seeing beyond fear. The old woman regained hope, purpose, and the warmth of companionship. Together, they quietly challenged the narrative of the village, showing that understanding and kindness could grow where fear had once dominated. Their friendship became a small beacon, a hidden light in a village that had long avoided anything unfamiliar, while the world outside remained cautious, judgmental, and wary. Within the walls of that small house at the edge of the village, two hearts discovered that connection, trust, and quiet courage were enough to change everything. This was only the middle of their journey. But already it was clear that lives long shaped by fear and isolation could find new paths through the simplest acts of attention and care. The old woman's health began to falter as the days grew colder. It started with small things, a cough here, a shortness of breath there, which she ignored at first, insisting she was fine. The girl noticed immediately. She saw the tremor in her hands when she carried a basket, a slight hesitation when she rose from her chair, and the way her eyes seemed to lose a bit of their shine. Concerned, the girl offered help, but the old woman waved it off with a soft, tired smile. "I'm old," she said quietly. "These things happen." The girl knew it was more than age. She stayed close, bringing warm water, soft blankets, and simple meals she prepared herself. The old woman's house, once filled with quiet loneliness, was now full of movement, care, and quiet conversations. The girl spoke gently, asking about her memories, her past, and her feelings, while quietly doing what needed to be done. In these moments, the old woman felt a sense of comfort she had not known for decades. One morning, the girl arrived to find the old woman sitting near the window, wrapped in a thin shawl. The woman's face looked frail, her body smaller than usual, yet there was a calmness in her eyes that reassured the girl. She placed a bowl of warm porridge on the table and sat beside her. "I'm worried about you," the girl said softly. "Please let me help." The old woman looked at her with a faint smile. "You've been helping more than you know," she whispered. "Sometimes people give their time, their energy, and their heart, and it changes things quietly. You have done that for me?" The girl felt a lump in her throat. She had only wanted to help, never expecting words like this. She reached for the old woman's hand, holding it carefully. The woman's fingers were thin, paper-like, but there was warmth in them. As the days passed, the old woman's condition worsened slowly. She could no longer tend the garden or prepare meals, and even simple tasks left her exhausted. The girl stepped in without hesitation, carrying water, cleaning, and ensuring the old woman was comfortable. She would sit by her side for hours listening to stories, sometimes reading aloud from old letters, and sometimes simply being present. One rainy afternoon, the old woman asked the girl to sit closer. She held a small, worn notebook, edges frayed from years of use. Inside were letters she had written to people long gone, notes about her life, her joys, her regrets, and her dreams. She handed it to the girl carefully. "Read them if you want," she said softly. "They are memories, some happy, some sad. They are mine, but I want you to understand who I was, who I am, and why I have been alone." The girl opened the notebook gently, turning the pages with care. She read the letters aloud slowly, making sure the old woman could hear each word. Some letters spoke of love, others of disappointment. Some were apologies, others confessions of mistakes made in youth or moments of courage that had gone unnoticed. The girl listened with patience, her heart growing heavier with each story, yet lighter with the understanding that kindness could still reach where fear had once lived. The old woman spoke, little as the girl read. Occasionally she would smile faintly or nod or close her eyes and breathe slowly. There were moments of tears too, as memories long buried surfaced. The girl stayed close, offering comfort without words. understanding that presence sometimes mattered more than anything else. As the winter months approached, the old woman's strength declined further. She could no longer walk outside, could not tend the few plants she had left, and struggled with even the simplest tasks. The girl did everything she could to maintain the home, prepare meals, and ensure the old woman remained warm and comfortable. Yet there was an underlying sadness, the knowledge that time was moving faster than they could manage. One evening, the old woman called the girl closer. Her voice was weaker than usual, but filled with calm determination. "I want you to know the truth about my life," she said. "Not the stories the village told, not the fears they spread. I was once a teacher, respected by my students and loved by many. But life has a way of changing everything. A misunderstanding, a mistake, and suddenly people turned away. I lost friends, trust, and family. I was left alone, and the village never stopped to ask why. Fear and gossip took over, and I was forgotten." The girl listened, holding her hand gently. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," she said quietly. The old woman smiled faintly. "Do not be sorry for me. I have learned to live with it. But I want you to understand that the world can be harsh. It can judge quickly, punish unfairly, and isolate the innocent. That is why your kindness matters so much. You have reminded me that goodness exists, even in the darkest times." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined that her small acts of help could carry so much meaning. She understood that her friendship had given the old woman comfort, hope, and a sense of being seen again. And in return, she had learned lessons about resilience, patience, and the strength that comes from acting with compassion. Days turned into weeks, and the old woman's health continued to decline. The girl remained by her side constantly, never leaving her alone. She would wake early to prepare warm drinks, clean the room, and ensure the old woman was comfortable. She would read aloud from the notebook, retell memories, or simply sit quietly, allowing the woman to rest. The old woman often spoke of her gratitude. "You have done more than you know," she said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have given me life when I thought it was gone." The girl would smile softly, brushing a strand of hair from the old woman's face. "I only did what anyone should do," she replied, but the old woman shook her head slightly. "No, most people would not. Most people would walk away. You stayed." Eventually it became clear that the old woman's time was near. She could not eat much, could not stand, and could barely speak. The girl stayed close, holding her hand, speaking softly, and offering comfort. She knew the world outside would continue without noticing, but in that small room, everything mattered. Every touch, every word, every shared breath became a testament to care, attention, and love. One night, as the wind howled outside and rain tapped against the windows, the old woman called the girl closer. Her voice was weak, but full of calm certainty. "Before I go, there is something you must know," she whispered. "I have kept something for you, something I want you to have when I am no longer here." She motioned to a small, hidden chest in the corner of the room. The girl opened it carefully, discovering old coins, a few pieces of jewelry, and a stack of neatly folded papers. The old woman had been saving for years, quietly, secretly. And she now entrusted it all to the girl. "These are not riches to make you rich," the old woman said softly. "They are a way to care for those who need help, to continue the kindness you have shown me, and to live a life that is brave, honest, and good." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She had never expected such a gift. More than the material wealth, it was the trust, the faith, and the acknowledgement of her care that mattered most. She held the old woman's hand tightly, promising to honor it in the best way she could. In the final days, the old woman grew weaker, yet her spirit seemed calm, at peace. She often smiled faintly, sometimes closing her eyes with a quiet sense of satisfaction. The girl stayed beside her, reading, speaking softly, and offering gentle comfort. She knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her forever. Then, one quiet morning, the old woman passed away peacefully, her hand in the girl's. The room was silent except for the soft breathing of the girl, tears rolling down her cheeks. She felt an overwhelming mixture of grief and gratitude. She had lost a friend, yet she had been given a gift more valuable than any material possession: trust, wisdom, and the experience of true kindness. The girl stayed by her side for hours. Reflecting on the life of the old woman, she remembered the laughter, the lessons, the quiet strength, and the enduring courage. She realized that what mattered most was not the fear of the village, but the love, attention, and care they had shared in those last months. When the villagers eventually came to learn of the old woman's passing, they were surprised. Some felt regret, some curiosity, and some shame. They had long judged without knowing, had feared without understanding, and had ignored a life that had quietly existed among them. The girl, however, focused on the lessons learned and the gift left to her, determined to honor the old woman's memory through her actions. Kindness and courage. This was a moment of quiet reflection, a turning point that would shape not only the girl's life but, eventually, the lives of those around her. The old woman's story, once hidden and misunderstood, had finally found a witness, a friend, and a continuation in someone who truly cared. And in that, there was hope, courage, and the promise that kindness, when given freely, could leave a legacy far beyond any fear or rumor. After the old woman passed away, the girl stayed by her side for a long time, feeling the weight of the loss, but also carrying the quiet gratitude for having known her. She carefully closed the old woman's eyes, arranging the shawl around her shoulders as she had always done. The house was silent, but it no longer felt lonely. The memories, the stories, and the lessons lingered in every corner. Filling the space with the warmth that had been missing for so long, the girl took some time before informing the village. She wanted to honor the old woman's privacy and reflect on the life she had shared. When word finally spread, the villagers came with mixed feelings. Some were curious, some regretful, and some simply shocked. They had always believed the old woman to be strange, dangerous, or cursed, yet now, confronted with the reality, they realized how wrong they had been. They had missed the opportunity to understand and connect. The girl quietly showed them the small chest the old woman had left behind. Coins, jewelry, and carefully folded papers were inside, along with a letter. She read the letter aloud to those who had gathered. It explained the woman's past, her life as a teacher, the mistakes that had led to her isolation, and her hope that someone would carry forward acts of kindness in her memory. The villagers listened, some shaking their heads in shame, others wiping tears. Realizing that fear and gossip had overshadowed compassion for far too long, despite their initial shock, the villagers slowly began to reflect on their behavior. They had judged without knowledge, feared without reason, and ignored someone in need. Some began quietly helping others, inspired by the girl's courage and the old woman's wisdom. The story spread beyond the small gathering, and soon, tales of the girl's kindness reached other parts of the village, encouraging people to reconsider their assumptions and take small actions of care in their own lives. The girl used the inheritance thoughtfully. She bought food and supplies for her mother, ensuring that her family would never again go hungry. She also saved a portion to help neighbors in need, particularly those struggling quietly like she and her mother had once been. She repaired parts of the old woman's house, creating a small garden and keeping the home as a place where others could come for comfort, advice, and friendship. It became a symbol in the village, a reminder that kindness could grow even in the most unlikely places. The villagers who had once avoided the old woman began to approach the house with curiosity. Some children came to see the garden, learning from the girl about herbs, plants, and simple acts of care. Some adults came quietly, asking for advice or guidance, and the girl welcomed them, sharing the lessons she had learned. Slowly, the house transformed from a place of fear to a place of learning, connection, and hope. As the seasons changed, the girl grew into a young woman with wisdom beyond her years. The lessons she had learned from the old woman became her guiding principles. She understood the power of empathy, the importance of listening, and the strength that came from courage and patience. Her reputation in the village shifted. People admired her not for wealth or status, but for her heart, her integrity, and her quiet determination to do good. She continued to care for the small garden the old woman had started. Herbs and vegetables flourished under her hands. She shared the harvest freely, teaching others to cultivate their own small plots. The home became a place where stories were shared, where laughter could be heard, and where people felt safe from judgment. In a village that had once feared the unknown, a seed of understanding and compassion had taken root. The girl often thought of the old woman, recalling her voice, her wisdom, and her quiet strength. She remembered the mornings of rain, the afternoons of work in the garden, and the long evenings spent sharing stories. Every act of kindness, every lesson learned, remained with her, guiding her choices and shaping her interactions with the world. The old woman's legacy lived on, not just in the inheritance she had left, but in the life she had touched and the hearts she had changed. The villagers eventually began to accept the truth about the old woman, understanding that fear had kept them from seeing the good in someone who had simply lived quietly and honestly. They acknowledged the girl's role in changing perceptions and honored her courage. Slowly, the story of the witch transformed into a tale of resilience, understanding, and the power of kindness. Children no longer feared the edge of the village. Instead, they listened to the girl's stories, learning lessons about empathy, bravery, and the importance of seeing the humanity in others. Years later, when the girl had grown into a young woman with a family of her own, she often told the story of the old woman who had taught her more about life than anyone else. She spoke of courage in the face of fear, of compassion that transcended judgment, and of the quiet power of staying by someone's side when others walked away. Her children learned that true wealth was not measured in coins or possessions, but in the love, trust, and kindness one shared with the world. The old woman's home, preserved as a place of memory and learning, became a small center of goodwill. Visitors came from other parts of the village to hear the story, to learn about the girl's courage, and to witness the lasting impact of a simple act of care. Herbs, vegetables, and small crafts were shared freely, each item a reminder of the power of generosity and the importance of seeing beyond fear. The girl, now a woman, often walked through the village, carrying the lessons she had learned in her heart. She greeted everyone with warmth, treated all with respect, and acted with integrity. The story of the old woman, once feared and misunderstood, had become a cornerstone of the village's moral memory. The girl's actions had shown that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict. In the quiet moments, the woman would sit by the garden, remembering the old woman who had trusted her, who had shared her life and her secrets, and who had left a gift that was far greater than wealth alone. She felt gratitude for having been chosen, for having been seen, and for having the courage to act when others hesitated. She understood that the world could be harsh, but kindness had the power to change it quietly and persistently. The story became more than a tale of inheritance or wealth. It became a lesson about human connection, empathy, and the quiet strength found in caring for another. The girl who had once been poor, fearful, and cautious had grown into someone who could influence hearts and minds simply by living with integrity and compassion. The old woman's trust and guidance had given her the foundation to build a life that honored both of them. The village, once divided by fear and rumor, had transformed in small ways. People became more attentive to each other, children played without fear, and neighbors offered help where it had once been withheld. The ripple effect of one girl's courage and one woman's trust created change that no one could have measured. Yet everyone felt it was a quiet revolution of heart, one that grew over time and left a lasting impression on the village's collective memory. Even decades later, the story was told not as a tale of a feared witch or a poor girl, but as a story of kindness rewarded, of trust honored, and of the extraordinary power of simple human actions. The girl, now a woman with wisdom and compassion, became a living reminder that when we choose to act with love, even in small ways, we can create legacies that outlive fear, judgment, and misunderstanding. And in the small house at the edge of the village, The garden continued to bloom, the herbs continued to grow, and the memory of the old woman remained alive, quietly teaching every visitor the value of seeing beyond appearances, of listening without judgment, and of choosing kindness, even when the world does not notice. Through the girl's life, the old woman's lessons continued, a gift more enduring than anything else she had left behind.